first heading that we're going to be looking at is Physical Geography of Europe. Your first subheading is Seas, Peninsulas, and Islands. Europe and Asia share a common landmass called Eurasia. It's the connection between Europe and Asia. Asia is connected with Europe west of the Ural Mountains. Most of Europe lies within 300 miles of a sea coast. The first aspect of seas, peninsulas, and islands that I want to look at is the Netherlands, the struggle with the sea. 25% of the Netherlands lies below sea level. Since the Middle Ages, the Dutch have built what's known as dikes. These are large banks of earth and stone. Their purpose is to hold back the sea. New land has been reclaimed because of these dikes. These reclaimed lands are called polders. These are drained and kept dry by windmills, and they have provided hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland for the Netherlands. Now I want to look at the peninsulas of Europe. Remember, a peninsula is a strip of land that is surrounded on three sides by water. We're going to look at the northern peninsulas first. Europe is a large peninsula made up of smaller peninsulas. Because of glaciation, which occurred in the last ice age, this is when glaciers were all over the land of Europe. Because of glaciation, fjords were carved out of the northern peninsulas. A fjord is a long, narrow, steep-sided inlet on the Atlantic coastline, specifically the Scandinavian peninsula, which is what we're looking at with the northern peninsula. Many fjords provide very fine harbors for ships to come in. These fjords, you can see, are jagged and they're cut out of the land of the Scandinavian peninsula. Another northern peninsula is Denmark. It has the peninsula of Jutland as it juts out into the North Sea. Now to the southern peninsulas. We have the Iberian Peninsula, which extends off the southwestern edge of Europe. This is the home of Spain and Portugal. You've got the Pyrenees Mountains that separate the Iberian Peninsula from the mainland of Europe. You have the Apennine Peninsula. This is the peninsula that houses Italy, the boot that stretches out into the Mediterranean Sea. And then you have the Balkan Peninsula, which is surrounded by the Adriatic and Ionian Sea on the west, with the Aegean and Black Sea on the east. Now moving on to mountains and plains. First, we're going to look at mountains. There's a couple of mountain ranges that I want to look at. The first is the Ben Nevis mountain range of the British Isles. These are a very old mountain range, and we know this because this mountain range is rounded at the top because of erosion. You will also have the Pyrenees Mountains, which are next to Spain. These are young mountains because they're very tall and rugged, and erosion has not affected them yet. There's also the Alps. This is the crescent-shaped mountain range that extends from southern France to the Balkan Peninsula. Now moving on to plains. The North European plain was flattened by glaciers millions of years ago. The North European plain is home to the Ruhr. This is a region in Germany that is very rich in coal that fueled industrialization. This is spelled R-U-H-R, the Ruhr. Also, this North European plain is extremely fertile. But essentially, what's most important about this plain nowadays is the coal and these resources that are found there. Now moving on to water systems. There's many rivers that flow inland from the mountains to the coasts. What Europeans have done is they have connected these rivers with canals, which have enhanced transportation routes and natural waterways. Canals are man-made waterways that are put there for economic purposes or transportation purposes. Now, a couple of rivers I want to point out to you. The first is the Thames in England. It looks like the Thames, but it is not. It is the Thames. The Thames in England allows ocean-going ships to reach the port in London. It's that big. We have the Rhine, which is the most important river in Western Europe. This connects many industrial cities, which makes it the most important river in Western Europe. And then we have the Danube, which is Eastern Europe's most important river. And then the last heading in physical geography is resources. The main thing I want to point out to you is the availability of coal. This fueled the Industrial Revolution and pretty much catapulted Europe to becoming one of the most developed continents in the world. Now moving on to your second major topic of this section of notes, climate and vegetation. First subsection I want to look at is water and land. Climates vary from cold, barren tundra and subarctic of Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and Finland to the warm, shrub-covered Mediterranean coasts of Italy, Spain, and Greece. Water is the unique determiner of climate in Europe. Think about this. The northern latitude of Europe makes it very cold. However, because of warm water ocean currents, areas warm next to the coasts that should normally be cold because of its latitude. So water is the key determiner climate of Europe. Now I want to look at Western Europe first. Much of Western Europe has a marine west coast climate, which means it has mild winters, cool summers, and abundant rainfall. The Atlantic Ocean's Gulf Stream and northern extension, the North Atlantic Drift, bring warm waters to this part of Europe from the Gulf of Mexico and regions near the equator. This is extremely important in determining the climate of Europe. These warm waters off of the Gulf Stream around the Gulf coast and the equator make their way to Europe because of the North Atlantic Drift and warm the area. Most of the natural vegetation in Europe, or in the Western Europe, is deciduous and coniferous forests. Deciduous forests are made of trees that lose their leaves in the fall. Coniferous forests are like needles of leaves. Their leaves are like needles. Now moving on to Southern Europe. Much of Southern Europe has a Mediterranean climate which has warm, dry summers and mild, rainy winters. There's also a pocket of humid subtropical climate in northern Italy and the Balkan Peninsula. Also, Spain has a drier steppe climate. The Alps create a rain shadow effect to the south side of their mountain range, which creates a drier area. You've also got wind system determiners of climate in southern Europe. You've got mistrals, which are strong winds from the Alps that bring cold winds to southern France and cool the temperatures. And then you have the siroccos, which are high, dry winds from northern Africa, and they bring very hot and dry climate temperatures to this region. And then the last climate region I want to look at is the Eastern and Northern European climate region. This is pretty much just cold. In the east, the warm Atlantic currents cannot reach that far, and so it gets colder once the currents of the wind system can't carry it anymore. In the north, it's just a very high latitude, so it's cold. So much so that there's permafrost, where the soil is literally frozen year-round.